Hey everyone, welcome to Bold Reflections. This is a coffee chat, and today I wanted to talk about COVID and the vaccines and this idea of the spirit of fear. Now, this is a super nuanced conversation. This is very complex, and I don't want to shame anyone for how they feel about it at all. You can have a difference in opinion. That is a-okay with me. I don't care. But I just want to express some of the things that kind of go through my mind when I think about this topic. So I feel like in a lot of ways, now that we are far removed from the beginning of the pandemic and even the onset of the vaccines, this big push that was in our society to get the vaccines, and now we are seeing some of the effects of it, like the actual physical effects, and the fact that we're starting to see that some of the claims of what was being said of the vaccines were completely untrue. And the sad thing is that there were people who were trying to express these things and getting just shut down. You would not see this on certain news channels. People were getting demonetized for this on social media or, banned, blocked, whatever, which is really the point of what my actual thought is this manipulation of fear to control people. And I believe that fear has a healthy context. It's totally fine if you are afraid of a lion because it's about to eat you. That's normal. It's even understandable to have been afraid of the idea of the virus, right? Listen, this virus in some populations, okay, let me make that very clear. In some populations was a huge threat. And I'm speaking from personal experience here. There were people who were dying from this virus, and I understand that. But what I can't get behind is the overreaction to fear. We were so willing as a country, as people, to just believe whatever was being told because we were afraid, right? We let schools be shut down. We let people lose their jobs over this. We let churches get shut down. It was to me, from the beginning, I always felt like this was an exercise in government control and like manipulation, population manipulation. Lots of Asian words coming out of my mouth right now. But I always felt that way. And yes, this was a legitimate threat, but also sometimes, okay, there's this song in Spanish. It's by Frankie Ruiz, called La Cura, which is the cure. And there's a lyric that says, La cura es más mala que la enfermedad. That the cure is worse than the actual, sickness. And in some ways, it kind of feels like that. I'm not shaming anybody for getting the vaccine because I believe there was so much like a smokescreen of confusion, of conflicting information, and suppression of certain information too. So it's pretty understandable that people would jump to the vaccine. Like, I get it. I kind of get it. Personally, I was of the thought, let me see what happens. Okay, let's give this a couple of years to see what is the effect of the vaccine, because I already felt like the actual virus itself was, a tactic to get people to, like, yes, it was a legitimate concern for certain populations, but let's see how we can manipulate people to give us more power and to create chaos and division and infighting. For what purpose? So that we can have more power and money. I really feel that way. So now that we're far removed from this, I just keep thinking about it, how the spirit of fear, we know from scripture that the enemy, what is it? He's the prince of, listen, I don't have everything memorized, okay? Let me look up the phraseology right quick. Prince of this world. There we go. That's what I meant. He is the prince of this world. So a lot of people who aren't following biblical principles they can be swayed away from good moralities, Christian ethic, to use fear not only to control and manipulate unbelievers, but also believers too, because sometimes fear can be so strong. I mean, over and over in scripture, we see God having to remind people, do not fear. Do not fear. Even in, look, I have it pulled up right here. Matthew 10:28. And do not fear those who can kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. So I feel like Satan will use whatever tactic he needs to use in order to get us to forget that God is in control here. And because we don't always set our mind on the eternal, and we don't always kind of focus in on our spiritual life and a healthy fear of God and an understanding of biblical principles and what the actual spiritual reality is, it's so easy for people in power, people with nefarious motives, to use that fear to control you. Now, I'm not saying they're agents of Satan, but I am saying that fear of, losing your life in this life has led to so much destruction. I can't help but feel like a lot of these athletes that are falling down dead, about every other week we're hearing of another story of another athlete. And I'm sorry, I've been around long enough, and by long enough, I mean more than a year and a half or 2 years since the vaccine came out. Like, when did the vaccine come out? And before that, we didn't have this overabundance of stories of people coming out, dying, athletes, professional athletes across the board, with heart conditions, with whatever else. We didn't have that before. But ever since the jab, come on. I'm not shaming you for having given into the fear, but look at the death that has ensued since and will continue to ensue because of the fear, because of giving into the fear. And I get it. There was so much information, misinformation, suppression of information, that if you were exposed to that information, you might not have seen the vaccine as the hope that it was sold as. And it is just so interesting how people were, encouraged to turn on each other. You would have people in the news saying things like, that the vaccine would prevent transmission. So if you didn't get the vaccine, you were not taking care of you were not loving your neighbor. Crazy stuff like that. And just, it was all lies. It was all lies. People with the vaccines were still getting COVID and dying from COVID. Just now you have this added element of, we don't know what the effects of the vaccine are going to be long term. So, I don't know. Like I said, this is not to make anybody feel bad about the vaccine. I'm just talking about like reality. There's something about fear that makes us cave sometimes to it. Like, I don't know, that was not very elegant. But it just makes me think of scripture over and over. I have this list pulled up with 31 Bible verses about fear, and I am not going through all of them, but over and over and over and over, it's like, do not fear, fear not, trust in the Lord. And I want to make clear that God, his will, he has sovereignty over it all. His will be done. And nothing under the sun happens without him knowing about it and it being part of his ultimate plan, right? For good. So no matter what the enemy's schemes are, he will always work it out for good. But anyway, I wanted to just, I don't know, get that thought fleshed out about how the enemy will use a legitimate fear to manipulate, control, cause chaos and destruction. And I think that's something that I'm not saying most of the people who are taking the vaccines are not following God. I'm just saying, going forward, let's keep that spirit of fear in check, because that is not something from the Lord. It's something that is being used a lot of the time to control you, to turn you away from God, to cause chaos and destruction. There are people whose souls are shrouded in darkness who will use fear, even, like I said, a legitimate fear of a virus, something that was, dangerous to certain populations, but he will use that to control and manipulate. So stay vigilant, as the scripture in, what is it, First Peter 5:8, I believe it's First Peter 5:8. Let me see. First Peter 5:8. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. Be sober, be vigilant, because he is like a lion seeking to devour, and he will use whatever tactic is necessary. So anyway, guys, that's all I got for today. God bless.